We're being sold this fiction that it's a limited number of acts. Reference, I'll use Spotify top 50. I got a big bug up my ass about Spotify, the reverse of what everybody else has.
Okay.
What kind of crazy f***ed up world do we live in? If no one is listening to you, you should get paid. And we hear from all these artists with marginal number of listens, they should get paid. They say, look at the old days. In the old days, they would not have gotten a record deal.
Bob Lefsetz is a renowned music industry insider and critic who spent the past 25 years shaping conversations through his widely read publication, The Lefsetz Letter. Known for his direct, no-nonsense commentary, Bob takes on everything from the changing nature of music distribution to artist development and offers hot takes unlike anyone else. This is my first episode of a new podcast called the Beato Pod, which will ultimately live on my second channel, Rick Beato 2. So hit subscribe on both channels. Here's my interview. Bob, welcome.
Good to be here, Rick.
I've really wanted to get your opinion on where the music business is in 2025. Can we start there and talk about where the labels went wrong initially, what the causes were? Take us through the last 25 years.
The business is completely balkanized. It's akin to politics. It's akin to streaming television. Okay, if we want to talk about streaming television, maybe there's a couple of shows we have in common. Maybe Severance, maybe Squid Game. But we are all watching different shows, and we are all listening to different music. However, the media does not tell us that. If you look at mainstream media, and I don't want to say that like in a political way, in a negative way, but the traditional outlets that have a lot of reach, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, other newspapers, news outlets, they have cut back entertainment reporting to almost nothing. And the people there, especially not at the major outlets, the big three, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, they are just reprinting bios. It's almost worthless. So
right,
the major labels have them convinced that we still live in a pre-internet paradigm where it's about hits. Okay, hits have never meant less. Taylor Swift, most people seem to know she wrote a song about me. I don't want to make this a judgment of Taylor Swift. I'm glad to do that. But go somewhere and ask people to name two Taylor Swift songs or to sing two Taylor songs. They can't. Okay?
They can't.
And
yes.
Irrelevant. Well, let's not make it a judgment of Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is literally one of the biggest acts out there. And if people don't know her music, what are the odds they're going to know other music? So we're inundated with acts. People of our vintage who are not in the business say, oh, I'm completely out of touch. I don't know what's going on. But they don't realize, even people who are of the demo, they're not comprehensive. They can't know what's going on. So we're being sold this fiction that it's a limited number of acts. Reference, I'll use Spotify top 50. I got a big bug up my ass about Spotify, the reverse of what everybody else has.
Okay.
What kind of crazy fucked up world do we live in? If no one is listening to you, you should get paid. And we hear from all these artists with marginal number of listens, they should get paid. They say, look at the old days. In the old days, they would not have gotten a record deal.
Never. That's right.
And then you have all these acts that had marginal sales, but the record companies invested in them such that they still have careers today. And they're saying, no one ever really listened to these acts in volume. So when we look at Spotify, which is the big kahuna, people are so ignorant, it makes me insane in that they say Apple Music pays more. First and foremost, there is no per stream rate. It's a pool of money which is divided. Apple Music, a stream is worth more because the subscribers are less active listeners. That
Right.
means they pay their monthly fee. They don't listen as much. So would you like more per stream where nobody's listening? You want to play where there's 5 people? You want to play where there's 50,000 people?
Right.
So the Spotify top 50, you can look at that and you could say, I don't know any of these acts, okay? But the truth is many people don't know any of these acts. Let's go in the reverse. On Sirius XM, I do happen to have a talk show on Sirius XM. They have a station, a college station. XMU is what it was originally called, still, whatever. I listen to that station sometimes and I say, this is a great song.
Okay.
And then I said, am I the only person other than the DJ who ever heard this song?
Probably.
There's no context. So, going back to your issue of the major labels, if the major labels did not have their catalogs, they would be out of business. So,
okay, explain that for people that don't know what that means about catalogs.
Up until very recently, when you recorded a record for what were one time 6 major labels, now 3, the record company owns the copyright. Okay? Now, I'm going to weave a lot of other stuff in here. What people don't realize is a lot of acts that were household names in the last century, they never received a royalty. So all these people bitching about Spotify is not paying them whatever. Now, in the old days, there was limited inventory in the record store, such that they could not buy the 10 albums one act made. They might stock the greatest hits album. Even Tower Records, which had incredible inventory, they could not stock every record. In addition, the records had to be pressed, shipped. There's so many different things in the chain. Whereas today, they just put them on these streaming services, and it's almost like free money. There's no marketing, there's no shipping, there's no cost. Theoretically, they have to pay royalties, assuming the act is in a positive position, but it's not only almost free money, the costs have been amortized long before, but they represent the greatest music of all time in such quantity that they use this in leverage with anybody they make a deal with. Let's go back to when Spotify started. People will argue, songwriters, that they're getting screwed on Spotify. I will argue they're not getting a big enough percentage. But that's because the original people who made the deals, the major labels, they also have publishing companies. So it all goes to funnels to the same pot. So they take it from here, they take it from there, it doesn't make any difference. By the same token, people can't handle change. I always use the example of cars. When I first was conscious, we used to have vent windows in cars, which were great. Open it up, give you a whiff.
Yes.
Then, when they had air conditioning in every car, they got rid of the vent windows. Now it would be great.
Right.
That'd be great if it was a vent window. But with every step forward, you lose a little bit. Okay? So, what we have air conditioning in every car. So songwriters are bitching that the paradigm shifted. In case people are unaware, in the old days when it was physical based, let's just use the easy numbers of 10 songs per CD. On the sale of the CD, the person who wrote the so-called album track got the same amount of money as the person who wrote the hit song. That is not the case anymore. People want to listen to the hits. Once again, if you're not writing a hit song, should you be making as much money as the person who did? What people don't understand is if you write a hit song, if you are a hit artist, Spotify et al. Are raining down an incredible amount of money.
That's right.
You can make a fortune. So the record companies use this leverage in all these deals with the catalog. In addition, it makes their numbers good. Let's use the example of tech. Tech is pretty mature at this point, but if you go back to the turn of the century, not only were there a lot of PC makers, there were mini computers, which is actually bigger than a PC, like Sun, like DEC, and they were ultimately subsumed or went out of business. Okay? So, new music, if the record companies had to survive solely on new music, the numbers look terrible. Okay?
Yes.
This is also, I use an example of film, which is not identical. The most successful independent movie company of the past few decades, it was a company called Kurywchak. They did Stallone movies, whatever. The company went bankrupt because they have a similar situation both in book publishing, which is antiquated still, and in movies, which is the so-called catalog, the backlist, all this other stuff. It keeps them alive. So if you're at home and you say, I want to start a record company, forget it, because you don't understand these kahunas have the table slanted in their favor, but in addition, they live off the catalog. So if we go back to the turn of the century when the record companies were asleep at the wheel with Napster, first everybody said the record companies are going to be fucked. Then it looked like they weren't going to be fucked. Right now, the major labels are losing market share, to independents. It's a little confusing because they also distribute a lot of the independents.
True.
But the share of the hit artists, the Taylor Swifts, the Morgan Wallens, whatever, that is decreasing. And the share of bazillion independent acts is increasing. So if you go back to the record companies, nobody has skin in the game. John Janik, who runs Interscope, he started with an independent label. All of these people are getting paid by the corporation with short-term thinking. These are not visionaries. The biggest seat at the table is Universal, which just consolidated Capitol and Interscope. Now, in a marketplace where you're making money, etc., you need more acts. More acts are creating revenue. So we could walk through every step of what happened. Suing the customers, Rootkit, the law from Napster to Kazaa, because there were different legal things that made Kazaa look good for a while. And then we have, the lockers with Kim.com. We had Steve Jobs. Everyone who says Steve Jobs saved the music business is ignorant. He created
talk about his deal that he made with the labels.
He gets credit for disintermediating the album. He said you can buy the individual track, you don't have to buy the album. But the sales paradigm of tracks was de minimis, very small in comparison to what the business used to be. Okay? Right. And yes, he was about ownership as opposed to streaming, but there's evolution in the marketplace. As far as Spotify goes, which is really the revolutionary product here, there were Rhapsody and other things before, but Spotify said, we are going to have a free, when I first heard it, I couldn't really believe it, that we're going to have a free tier and we are going to eliminate copyright infringement / theft. So they were the first company that understood the way the game works.
You embraced that, Bob. Is that correct?
I don't see how we had this rampant theft problem. Do you know anybody who steals music anymore? I don't know a single person.
No.
Okay.
No one does.
So Spotify eliminated that, getting rid of the friction among other things. But where I was ultimately going with this is when I grew up, there were a lot of Westerns on TV. And when the bank was robbed, what did they do? They got the town elders together. They didn't say, we're going to build a big megaphone and tell the robbers to bring the money back. They always said, we're going to cut them off at the pass. I remember when Spotify launched, I gave away more free subscriptions literally than anybody else in America. I'd known those guys for years. People couldn't comprehend it. Well, what if I'm out of signal range? No, it's going to be on your device. I mean, everybody understands it now. Right. I also want to say is, it's just like Amazon reviews. Let's assume I'm trying to think of great products. I mean, iPhone, whatever, or a Mac. You're going to go on there and there are going to be things that get 1-star reviews. Usually it broke or it came broken, whatever. There's always going to be cranks. You cannot listen to them. People ask me, what's after Spotify? Nothing, because it's on demand. You don't have it whenever you want it. That gets it. So the major labels survived this big crisis as a result of consolidation and the balkanization. I would not say they're in a good spot, but of course their catalogs always give them strength. One of the debates in the business is, will one of these huge monetary entities come along and buy one of these companies and eliminate new music development and just operate it as a catalog? That has not happened. We could get deep into finance. If you follow Universal Music, which went public, the numbers stalled because the market was fearful that they're reaching a limit in the number of streaming subscriptions in the world. We could go deeper there, but if something becomes depressed in price, then someone else could own it. Now, the other thing people don't realize, some of these companies are so valuable that you need something on the level of Apple or NVIDIA to have that cash. Most companies can't really buy all that stuff. So we could go deeper into the history of the labels. I just want to say one other thing. The Beatles were a revolution. Yes, depending on who you just talk to, now most people think that Ike Turner with Rocket 88 was really the first rock track at the beginning of the 50s. But the early 60s were just like they are now. Junk. And the Beatles came along. There was hit material. Then as a result of a change with FM radio, we had album rock. We had free format, meaning the DJs could play whatever they want. There was so much money in it that this radio consultant, Lee Abrams, came along in the early 70s. He formatted it so more of it was called the Superstars format, and it was more akin to top 40 radio, not that tight. Then it's so much money, we got corporate rock, and then we had disco, and then it all imploded in 1979-80. I mean, the biggest record at that point was Supertramp Breakfast in America, was number one forever, but sold a limited number of copies. Then MTV came along. Forget that it saved the business, and then we had CDs. It returned to the hit paradigm. Then we have a number. So the acts that were, King Crimson, all these acts that never really had a hit but survived on FM radio, that was pushed down. But the worst thing is, as years go by, we don't have people who remember. I mean, a lot of people want to be Mariah Carey. Divas were a joke to those of us who've been around AOR. So there's been a big evolution.
To me, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, when all the consolidation of media started happening, led to the homogenization of music, and then Cumulus, Clear Channel, buying up all these radio stations, at least in the music. I mean, all of media consolidated. That set the stage for this. And then the Napster was the catalyst that just blew up their whole model. And when they couldn't figure out how to sell $18 CDs anymore, because nobody wanted to pay when they can get whole hard drive full of MP3s for free from their roommate in their college dorm, the labels just were frozen in place. This is kind of what you're talking about. They couldn't figure out what this new business was. And in some ways, I think they still haven't figured it out. which leads me to TikTok. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the labels have used TikTok as the way that they do music promotion.
Let's pull the lens back. Let's look at it in a positive way.
Okay.
This is a field day for artists. You can record the record on your laptop. Everyone's got one. You can even record it on your phone, actually. That's certainly something everybody has. You can record it on your laptop. You can post it for almost nothing to every streaming service, and you can promote it for free. Okay?
Right.
The problem is there aren't that many good artists. And now more than ever, you are competing with the greatest hits of all time. I happen to write about this artist, and I like this artist, guy Neil Francis. I won't give the whole background. And they sent me 2 of his new tracks. And one of them is really good. The other one they think is the hit. The problem is, and he's very good, he doesn't have a good enough voice to appeal to absolutely everybody. If this were the pre-internet era, somebody would say, we need a lead singer.
Right.
Okay. Historically, I can go bands after bands. They had to get someone to sing. You know, I hear from people all the time. What do you think of me? I don't respond to anybody. There's no upside. I could go down that avenue. But when I used to respond, first of all, they're shocked when you don't say something positive. You say, well, you know, the vocals weren't that good. Well, what about the lyrics? You know, Bob Dylan couldn't sing. And I say, Bob Dylan was the best lyricist of all time. You're not in his league. You need a better voice. Let's go back to what you originally started with was rock. Okay? Rock became a caricature of itself with the hair bands. Then we had the Seattle scene. Then in the 21st century, VH1 made Dave Matthews Band and Coldplay successful. Coldplay is one of the biggest touring. I don't get it. I think the second Coldplay album is great after that. I don't get it. But one of the biggest bands in the world, almost independent of hits. The rockers decided they were anti-technology. Country streams a lot better than rock. There's a rock format called active rock. There's a chart, etc. If you haven't been following this music for 20 years, you can't understand it. In order to understand these bands, you had to listen to Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Metallica, just to even understand what they're doing.
Right.
So, in terms of rock, rock is totally alive. They just call it country. Go to a Chris Stapleton show. That's rock and roll. Okay?
That's right.
So, the old paradigm, which never changes, all music, in terms of verse, chorus, bridge, hook, you know, it's like they forgot that in rock, and they forgot it to a good degree, you know, in pop music, whereas country, they're doing it. I don't want to defend the right-wing politics. I don't want to defend the songs about babies in trucks. But there are people in Nashville doing amazing things, which, of course, brings us to the biggest story of the last few years, Zach Bryan.
Yes.
So Zach Bryan, they contact me. He had just signed with Warner Brothers. Come to the Wiltern. Okay, there were no hits. Okay, there was nothing. I'm in the audience. This guy puts out albums with 20 tracks on them. Okay, everybody in the audience knew every track, every song. And of course, there's no hard drives, no nothing. This guy can play stadiums. There's an authenticity, a credibility that are people looking for. We could talk to the major labels. Why don't we have more of that? Let's stay with that same paradigm. The biggest act, new act, really was Adele. Okay. You think they would sign somebody like Adele, but they don't. Okay. So the thing about internet culture is if something is good enough, it can reach everybody instantly. Right now, we are not in a good musical period. Technology's totally figured out. We argued about it for a decade, a little bit longer. We got the system all figured out. We just got a lot of crap going through there. So The problem isn't the major labels and the leverage and the Live Nation and all that other BS. If you create a hit record, and I don't mean that because it's number one, but if you create something great, I am going to tell everybody I know about it, and so are you. Because we can't, we are looking 24/7. No, we find them go, holy shit, we got to tell everybody about it, okay? What the Fontaines, I'm going to look like an idiot, you know, the band from England. How many times have I heard Fontaines DC, whatever the hell it is? And yes, your music is not good enough. You know, there's a TV show, I think it's on Peacock, called The Agency. It's the remake of a French show called The Bureau. That is as good as any movie I've seen in decades. I think it was on MHZ, which most people don't subscribe to. You get for like $6 a month. But that was better than any record. I'm not saying every TV show is. When done right, music only competes with one thing, which is sex. Okay? And when people are doing something different, like video games or TV, that's because it's better than the music. The New York Times, in December 10th, I think they have this woman, Lindsay Zolatz, who writes their music, puts out a playlist. She did the best songs of 2024. I know these acts. When I start to listen, I go, these are just not good. Okay, right. I know when something doesn't appeal to me, it's out of my genre, or I said, this is not that good. Because when there's, I mean, like the Billie Eilish track, which was the biggest track there, that's okay. Maybe if you played it on a $4,000 stereo with the dark, it might even be better. But it's not going to be something that someone listens to once. So I am sick of all the complaining. Let's say with the same, people don't want to know the truth. It's like Jack Nicholson in the movie. They talk about Ticketmaster. No matter how many times you tell people the truth of the fees, they will not believe it. The fees are high because of the acts, but the acts can't be guilty.
No.
I could go, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You just can't tell them the truth. So if someone makes a great record, or someone like Zach Bryan comes along, we're going to find them. It may be slower than before. The rest of the people complaining, they're just not that good. And good is not good enough. You got to be great.
Do you think that the old school A&R people, the good ones, they knew who the arrangers to hire were?
Wait. As far as the A&R guys, sure, John Hammond signed, Springsteen. Other than maybe John Ladner at Atlantic and Geffen, the A&R guy was a talent scout. Now all the talent, anybody can find it. The other thing about the A&R guy was the ability to sign. Like my friend Jason Flom, he signed Lorde. He signed Lorde when she was already with a deal in New Zealand, and they told her, the parents said, well, she was going to be a lawyer. And Jason convinced, this is a one and only time, okay? So, all this artist development horseshit, etc. The world changed. You can put out a record every day if you want to, every minute if you can write it that fast. Yes, will it be harder to be recognized? If you got the talent and you have the perseverance, fine. The problem is not the major labels. The problem is not Spotify. The problem is not algorithms. The problem is the music. Statistically, Spotify says the active user picks and chooses their songs. I have to listen to this crap. A woman wrote a whole book about it. It's coming out very soon. Where, the algorithm, it serves up just what you want, etc. The people listening to the algorithm are working in an office where it's tuned down in the back. This is not active listening. The active listener who has always driven the business, he is picking and choosing. If you are a music fan, you can't listen to these playlists. The hit-to-shit ratio is so bad. Spotify is the best, whether it be New Music Friday or the ones just for yourself. You can't do that. I mean, it's a professional business. I have to go through some of these places. You can't do it. Hot Country, Spotify Top 50. There is so much crap. So everybody learns from word of mouth. Most people have no fucking clue how recommendation works. It's not whether you like it. It is whether the person you're recommending to likes it.
That's right.
That was the great thing, when we had the heyday of FM radio, et cetera, et cetera. But if I'm sitting here and I hear it from 4 different people, even if I don't know this, well, I'm going to give it a listen. Okay. So there are things that motivate us. As far as the major labels, they're fucked. They don't. I can't find someone under the age of 20 who listens to terrestrial radio. Okay?
Right,
so
that's right.
all their traditional levers, they can get you in the newspaper. They can get you on late night TV. No one who's an active person who is even looking there. So when people are saying, the odds are stacked against you, yes, it's going to take you an incredible, when I get email from people, I'm going to give it 18 months. If it doesn't work, I'm going to go to graduate school. Or else you get the people say, well, how am I going to pay my mortgage and my car payment? I can tell you about bands and major labels I was hanging with where the cars got repossessed.
Yeah.
Who told you to have a family? These people have no idea. You have to be in it for decades and you still may not make it. In addition, talent is at most 50%. They're really not working studio musicians at this point in time.
That's right.
But you talk to someone who is not the face of the band, who works on a regular basis. They're the best networker known to man. You talk to someone, he's a drummer with working different bands, a bass player. Some of these people I know, not as musicians, were assholes. And I see them with musicians. Oh, they're the best person. What do you do when you come to my house? You have to have all of these skills. And
That's right.
Oftentimes it's not how well you play, it's whether you're a dick or not. But people say, oh, the system's stacked against me. I can't make it. Okay? As far as artist development, yes, there was a period 25 years ago where they called artist development, one record. Well, we took it from 0 to hero, which was
maybe two, Bob.
Okay,
but occasionally.
Today, that is your job. That's the way it's going to be. Let's stay with social media. I hear from people from Gen X and boomers, they cannot stop complaining other than they're all on Facebook. We're forgetting Facebook. Okay, TikTok, all this other stuff.
That's the problem.
TikTok. And you say, have you ever been on? I can't find anybody who's on. Everybody who's complaining isn't on. If you were on, or Instagram Reels, it is absolutely riveting. Forget the music ones. It's better than the music because they contain what music used to have. Credibility, honesty. Yes, there's a lot of influencers hawking crap, but that's not the average person.
No, agreed.
You go on there. So the record companies, they're looking for shortcuts. They find something successful. Right now, the wisdom is, didn't work. Okay? We give them a lot of money. Doesn't cross over to Spotify, etc. So, they're trying and trying. But the problem is not the big kahunas against you. Let's give an example. I used to believe, it was in the LA Times or the New York Times, everybody saw it. If I write about it, I work for myself, I reach the target audience better than the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Agreed.
So if I'm bitching about them, I got the wrong perspective, okay? Or they'll call me and they'll say, well, how do you know these people? The game has completely changed. In addition, we do not live with a pyramid, okay? There's no goal you make it to the top. The press, as we say, wanted to make that Taylor Swift. You are in your own cottage industry. I use an example all the time. This band Tedeschi Trucks. Susan Tedeschi had a middling career. Derek Trucks played with the Allman Brothers before Greg Allman died, and it was over. They go on the road. They have dedicated fans.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of their songwriting, but they get a business. In the old days,
big business.
The old days, well, when are they going to write a hit and cross over to AM? Never. Or Blues Traveler with Runaround. Never. That doesn't exist. You'll play bigger festivals. Maybe you can have your own festival. And that's it. You're looking for something that doesn't exist anymore. There is not, I'll leave it at that.
The idea that things are so difficult, to your point, when you can make the stuff on your laptop or your phone, you can put it out there instantly, worldwide distribution. And that was the thing that the labels had historically. They had distribution. That's what made them so powerful. Sure, they had budgets to make records that were expensive to make. Now you can make them for just about nothing. You can put your pieces of your songs on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you want, and it's free distribution to the entire world. But I'm going to segue to something different. There's a new documentary coming out, Becoming Led Zeppelin, and it talks about the session careers of Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones. They go through how the band members met, how they had their first rehearsal, and then I guess it goes through the first couple records. And there's some amazing, just if you watch the trailer, some amazing videos that I've never seen, footage I've never seen. I'm hoping with that there's a resurgence of people playing instruments because of this movie, because a similar thing happened with Queen. If you go look at Queen's streaming numbers, all their top songs have 2 billion plays. They have twice as many monthly listeners than the Beatles do. And I assume it's because of the Bohemian Rhapsody movie. And I'm hoping that Zeppelin has a similar resurgence, or maybe inspires kids to start more than a couple bands. I asked my son, I said, how many bands are there at your school? He goes to school with, I don't know, his graduating class is probably 250 kids or so. Are there any rock bands? No. My son plays guitar. He can't find enough people to fill out a band at his school.
I just want to make one comment about what you said earlier about distribution.
Yeah.
Distribution is king, not content. If you can't find it, doesn't matter how good it is. Going to your point, I am waiting for the blues revival. We had the mid to late 60s English acts, Cream, Clapton, Page, goes on and on and on, that were all influenced by the Delta blues people. I'm wondering whether that will come back. Past always comes back with a twist. It's never identical. However, I know a guy's very successful. He's a white Jewish guy just like me, but he's more in the black business, this guy Mike Karen. And I remember just a handful of years back, and he goes, my kid, the iPad is his instrument. I know a lot of people in the electronic music sphere. I've been to a lot of festivals. You may or may not like that music, but there's a lot going on there. Yes, there are people who just push buttons. The fact that an instrument has to be a traditional instrument, I am not in agreement with that. Having said that, when you write about this stuff, meaning me, you will hear from everybody who goes to the school of rock. It's a self-selecting thing.
Right.
Okay. They are keeping this alive. Having said that, it's like Berklee College of Music. Yes, John Mayer went there, Lake Street Dive. Having the skill is different from having the inspiration. Okay? Especially in rock. You want to play in the orchestra, the Philharmonic, totally different story. But you want to write songs, you want to write music. It is a different skill. Let's start with bands. Everybody from our vintage, I'm a little older than you, played in a band. Who the fuck wants to be in a band? You can't, Sam Moore recently died. Sam and Dave, one of the great acts of all time, they had no relationship. It was pure business. Okay? Never mind Hall & Oates today, et cetera, et cetera. The odds of 4 or 5 people getting along, staying along, forget it. So, in most acts, not all acts, not the Beatles, et cetera, there tends to be one person who's a creative person. Now that person can do it by themselves. Okay, we had that hit Fireflies by Owl City. It's already a few years back, etc. I know managers who manage household name acts who will not work with the band because there's just too much going on. They can't get consensus. You got to keep the band together. It's too much work. Now, a friend of mine wrote a book about Duane Allman. He says that Duane Allman used to take his guitar to the bathroom. Whether that's true or not, he certainly practiced a lot.
Yep.
Most of the classic rockers did it to get laid. They were shy, they couldn't talk to girls, etc. Today, there are easier ways to get laid than being able to be an incredible guitar player. Okay? So, is terrestrial radio coming back? No.
No.
Are all these bands coming back? No. Is there a self-selecting group that wants to play conventional real instruments? We just talked about Zach Bryan. The other great example, you were talking about age. Chris Stapleton, not only is in his 40s, this guy doesn't look like a rock star in anybody's book. Okay? Overweight, and the public is embracing them. Yes, at the same time, he happens to be on a label, but you got to laugh when the major labels are signing younger and younger people. And I get this all the fucking time from parents. Here's my kid. They're 12. They're great. Whatever. What the hell does a 12-year-old have to say? I mean, it's better. It's better now than ever before. And you can sing, and you go on social media. Some people, they're incredible hot guitarists, but they can't write it. It's like Pete Townsend, who's a little bit of a difficult guy in real life, but he will go on record again and again that he's not the greatest guitar player, but he could write all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing is, it was a self-selecting group, okay? So you have the Jefferson Airplane, the San Francisco Sound, 66, 67, that comes in after the British invasion. Bill Graham was the manager for a while, and he said whenever they got any money, they didn't want to work. They want to stay home and smoke dope, okay? Bands were middle-class people. I think one of the things that hurts the music business, in addition to no music in schools, I think that's a big problem. It's amazing how many musicians you talk to who learned how to play in school. Nathan East, bass player, plays with everybody, learned how to play in school, okay? But it was middle-class people. It was always we knew who the artistic kids were. Girls might have been beautiful. Guys they were in their own world. No one ever wanted their kid to be an artist, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They did their own thing. We might know them. We might have a bad relationship, but we're not hanging with them. They're the ones who used to make music. Now, if you talk the major label paradigm, there are people who will do anything to be famous and want to create a brand. In addition, Jefferson Airplane said no. Today, you can't find anybody to say no. You want to go on this show? You want to do this? They don't even have the artistic mentality. I'm going to get on my high fucking horse now here for a second. Okay? One of the things that broke the British invasion of the Beatles is they wrote their own material. I'm a huge Joe Cocker fan, great interpreter, but when you write the material and you sing it, there's a different resonance in most cases. Yes. The Weeknd is a Toronto buzz. Then he goes to work with Max Martin. Well, Max Martin learned how to play in Sweden. This guy can make the records himself.
Exactly.
So you have all these people, Taylor Swift, or you had Mutt Lange before him. Mutt Lange could literally make the record himself. You're such a big artist that you're going to work. I mean, if you talk with Taylor Swift, she originally wrote material with Liz Rose, and I was really into it. It was like a teenage Joni Mitchell. Then she got so much shit. She wrote by herself, not as well. And now she works with other people, okay? Yes. It's not the same thing as being alone in your bedroom testifying, okay? People want insurance. It's just like the major labels. I mean, this happened to be on TikTok or Instagram Reels just last night. And it was a clip of Howard Stern talking to Steven Tyler. And he's talking about Sweet Emotion. And that click sound, blah, 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 blah. He said, I can't even remember what instrument it is. And Steven says, listen right now. It breaks. And you're going to hear it stop. It's in Sweet Emotion. In Last Kiss, which Pearl Jam did a cover of. You listen to the original, there's a background where the woman goes, she can't hold it that long. It's not about getting it perfect, comp vocals, whatever. It's having that je ne sais quoi. Very few people can deliver that. People who lived through the classic rock era, it's akin to the Renaissance. We had Michelangelo, we had Raphael. They have painted and sculpted ever since, but there was only one Renaissance.
That's
we
right.
only had one Beatles. It'd be great if we got a new Beatles. Okay? So it's not about looking at what we had and what we lost. Yes, inspiration from the past is important, but using the new tools to get it right. And maybe it's just acoustic instruments, but you made the record in your basement. I mean, let's be clear, unless you were an incredibly successful act, you went into the studio on a schedule. They gave you a producer.
Oh, yeah.
We're cutting this. We're not wasting any time. There's too much money involved.
Bob, when you're thinking of things that you're going to write about in your newsletter, how do you come up with ideas?
I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to sound really left field. Okay. You'll hear from people all the time, oh, I don't know what a hit record is. Al Cooper's health is not great at this point. He's a friend of mine. There was an induction of somebody at the Guitar Center Walk of Fame in Hollywood. Okay. And I'm hanging with Al. And he's telling the story of Sweet Home Alabama, which is relatively well known. First Skinner album comes out. Has Freebird, is not an immediate hit. Right. Comes out within a month of that coming out. He gets a phone call from Ronnie Van Zant in Jacksonville. And Al's in the producer is in Atlanta. And he says, we got to come up. We got to cut a new song. We got a new song. They come up on Monday. They cut Sweet Home Alabama, which does not come out for a year. And I said to Al, did you know it was a hit? And he looks at me in the eye and he goes, it was Sweet Home Alabama. Anybody who's writing, you're searching for the 11. What people don't know, anybody who's been in this a long time will tell you, I'm talking about songwriters. Yeah, people think they start writing songs, they're good. Then they look back 100 songs or 10 years later, go, man, was that crap. You have to have a facility. We mentioned earlier, I'm a big skier. I have skied so much. You're going to look at me and go, that's great, okay? I used to say 30 days, maybe 20 days. Now, I have to ski 20 or 30 days in a row to get that extra 1%. So that, like, if I catch an edge, I can recover, et cetera, et cetera. You have to have those skills, okay? I've been writing for decades. I'm never going to write something crappy. I want to write an 11. I'm never going to write anything less than like a 7 or an 8 because I've been doing it too long. And I also know how the game is. At this point in time, I am a voracious reader. I am reading all day long. I get 3 physical newspapers. I read other stuff, whatever. A lot of my information and inspiration comes from that. My best ideas always come up when I'm doing something else. The people, I don't really quite get it. The people who say, I got to write an album and sit down and do it. Okay. A lot of times I'm taking a shower. There's some liberation. Ideas come to you. Okay. I know when I'm hot, and sometimes it bugs me when I'm not hot. And the good thing about it is just like making records. I don't finish what I write maybe once a year because I've learned you don't never really know what you have. But if I write it and I'm not happy with it, I don't feel good. But I know, well, I could write another thing right now, or I could write something tomorrow, just like making a record. The other thing is evolution. People don't like to evolve. There's money in going and playing your legendary hits decade after decade. I don't know how the fuck you do it. A lot of people have to because they were ripped off the first time.
That's true.
So, there's a lot of stuff I used to do that I don't do in volume anymore because I did it. And in addition, doesn't resonate as well. I mean, I wrote about a ton of Led Zeppelin songs, 10 Years Gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if I happen to get inspired, I might write that. But as far as sitting in front of the computer, well, let me write it. Been there, done that. You have to evolve. And it's challenging. I mean, listen, I'm no different from these musicians. Yeah, my goal is to reach as many people as possible, okay? But no one can reach everybody like in the old days. And you never know what makes a difference. I mean, everybody who's been around the block will tell you, my big break, what I thought was going to be my big break was never my big break, okay? And it's like, I can tell you this and that, whatever. I was just a couple of weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal.
Yes.
Little did I know they were going to put it on the very first page or the top of the opinion page, whatever. I heard from everybody I ever knew.
Bob, I heard from everyone about your Wall Street Journal, and I read the Wall Street Journal, and people were sending it to me.
Well, irrelevant of the experience, which I'd be glad to tell, but leaving it aside, it's like, okay, let me tell you the essence of that experience, other than hearing from the people you haven't heard from in decades and hearing from the people who never really gave you the time of day. It shows me there's still audience out there.
Yes.
There's still people to reach, and that is exciting. Because just when you think, you say, well, the numbers aren't growing, it's the usual person. Just to go one step further, I'm in the luxury of, if I nail it, if I write about anybody in the world, they read it. And you have funny experiences where you go somewhere and there's a famous person there, and they talk to you like your best friend. They read what you wrote about them. Okay. Right. And, I always analogize it to the hurricane. I'm in the eye of the hurricane. I have no idea. Like you're saying, but I didn't know that until you told me. I'm sitting here and hitting send. Am I trying to get it right? Yes. Am I aware of the audience? Yes. Do I try to ignore the audience? I mean, it's like talking to David Gray yesterday. It used to be in the old days, everybody was unsophisticated. You want to know how the business works? Just buy Don Passman's book. It explains it from soup to nuts. Now, everybody knows that stuff. It's about being an artist, where most people, they want to talk about the mechanics. They want to bitch about Spotify. They want to talk about being a brand. They want to talk about the person. No, it's about the actual work. And if you talk, I know a lot of business people. And there's some people I can really connect with. But pound for pound, I connect with the artist. It's a different perspective. They're kind of laughing at the world. And there's a rare one who puts the money first. I have met all my heroes. They've written songs that I can live to and cite right now, almost to a letter. They're all difficult people, most assholes. Not Steven Tyler, exception to the rule. That guy, I can tell you a story. That guy is the definitive rock star, lives up. But I can talk about people, household names. These are alienated fucks. They just like me. They got it down right. But don't think. I was married to a woman, and she once said, this was after we were separated, she goes, you don't have tolerance for most people. And that's true. It's like people eat. Just going one step further here. I only want to deal with the person who can say yes or no. If you can't say yes or no, that doesn't mean we can't be friends. But the people who I know this person at the label. Can they sign you? No, then who gives a shit about them? You got to have the person who can say yes or no. The other thing is Ken Cragen, interesting manager, unbelievably successful. every act he worked with fired, and every act never had the same level of success after. This gets into management. Ultimately, had to be his way. His way was always right, but people don't want to hear it. He used to teach a class at UCLA Extension. I wasn't in the class, but I had a friend who did. And he goes, I am not your connection. Your connection are the people sit left and right to you. So it's just like me. The people you come up with. I knew this guy, Johannan Vagoda, legendary lawyer. Legendary, who looked like a homeless person. He was Stevie Wonder's lawyer. I knew him, whatever. I was struggling. We were having lunch one day, and I must admit, I was trolling for a connection. And he looks at me and he goes, I'm not a railroad train. I don't pick people up at one station and drop them at another. So, these people who email, just help me. The other thing's, nobody is that powerful. You really think that if I write about you, let me be clear. Okay, unsolicited material. Only once did I hear something I thought was great. I connected with the president of a label and got signed. Everything else, not good enough. I mean, people hate it when I crap on stuff. But I can listen to your crap or I can listen to Joni Mitchell. It's like, I'll listen to you. Want to do something that good? I'm interested. Okay.
I'll listen to Joni Mitchell any day. People say to me, Bob, that you could break artists on your YouTube channel. And I say, no, I can't. Just because I have a lot of people that follow my YouTube channel, that doesn't mean anything that I can make someone successful. If somebody had an amazing song that connected with people and they came on my channel, maybe that would help a slight bit, but there's very little that one person can do to help anyone's career. Nothing is transferable from the things I do.
I wrote about Brandy Carlisle's The Joke, and I know all the people at the Howard Stern show, etc. They read what I wrote and they booked her. And that was part of going on, whatever. But if you heard that song, you didn't need me to tell you. Okay, right. It was, right there. Or it's like, even I wrote about last night about this Anita Pallenberg documentary. I got almost no response at first. Then I started getting from friends, oblique responses. And I realized, I said, what are you talking about? They watched the documentary. Okay. They had the same visceral experience. That's why I say, if you do anything great, we're going to tell everybody about it. Because when they tell us, they love it. I mean, in the old days, I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories. There was this guy who was the guitarist, Paul Kossoff, in Free.
Amazing guitarist.
Had a band, and Paul Rogers said best guitarist he ever played with, and he played with everybody. Brian May, Jimmy Page, etc. He had this act, Backstreet Crawler.
Okay.
Flying from New York to England, he died on the plane. Conventional wisdom was he OD'd. Someone said, oh, no, basically his body was worn out, whatever happened. My friend in England, Richard Griffiths, was the agent. And the opening act was going to be AC/DC.
Okay.
In a club where you walk downstairs into the club. AC/DC, managed by the Brownings at that point, very beginning, said, we're going to play the gig anyway. There are 8 people there.
Okay.
They play. They carry Angus around on the shoulders, whatever. They're done. The 8 people run out of the venue. And Richard is there. It's like, this is an unbelievable disaster. Okay. The second happens, place is full. Everybody left. Pre-cell phone, to find the phone. Said, you are not going to believe the act that we just saw. He got fired anyway, but, if you know something great, it's like, if you're going to tell everybody.
There's a band that I never talk about on my channel because they are so hated when I do mention them, and it's the band U2. And U2 made some amazing records. And they have really squandered their career and made terrible, as far as I'm concerned, terrible decisions since Paul McGuinness, their manager, their original manager, retired back in, I don't know, 2011 or so. People always cite when they put their record on the iPhone. I think Guy Oseary was their manager at that time. That may have been his first act as a manager. Why is it that bands like that can't get good advice, or is there just a time when artists need to just pack it up?
I know everybody involved in this story. If you know
Okay.
Paul McGuinness, he never had a successful act other than U2. He was like a member of the band. To this day, he was a bull for his band. No one believed in U2 as much. Okay? Guy Oseary, we're good, but we've had a lot of ups and downs. One, very much down at a U2 show. Once you start playing your old albums live, when they did the Joshua Tree, that's the end.
It's over.
You're immediately a nostalgia act.
Your cover band.
Right. But it really begins before that. U2 was killed during the rattle and hum post-Joshua Tree era. That's when everybody said Bono is God. I used to love the first album most, but the album after that, Achtung Baby, at first you can't understand it. That's my favorite U2 album.
Amazing album.
But then the next album with the disco type element failed, pop.
Yep.
And then Beautiful Day, really? You're doing that? That's a hit? That's a lightweight track? They're acting like they're not getting any older, that someone is interested in the hits, etc., etc., etc. Having said that, they switched managers to Irving Azoff, who there's no one better as a manager, okay? And they opened the Sphere, granted with a different drummer or whatever. It's very tough. You become self-conscious, and you can't do it. Forget the cliches that you write all your material when no one knows, and you got to write your second album. You can't relate to the average person because you've been on the road. And,
That's right.
You know, the only thing you can do is change it up. But most people can't. Remember, Garth Brooks, he wanted to do a rock album. He came up with a completely different name, Chris Gaines.
Chris
whatever,
Gaines,
blah, blah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
David Bowie, and man, you know, some of these acts, I was there. I saw David Bowie on the Ziggy Stardust tour, whatever, blah, blah, blah. When he became the Thin White Duke, yeah, Young American album. I don't like Fame, but I love Somebody Up There Likes Me. Okay, even the Berlin trilogy is good, but Tin Machine and some of that other crap, not good. He was willing to go through that to get to the other side.
Right.
How many other people? Neil Young, who's intentionally destroyed us a couple of times, when he was at his biggest, went live after Harvest, played all new material on guitars, whatever. Most people will not take the risk, and therefore they can't develop. Also, I mean, Jackson Browne, Late for This Guy, you know, one of my absolute favorites of all time. In 1993, he made an album called I'm Alive, which was acoustic, just like the earlier albums. Phenomenal. Did not resonate incredibly in the marketplace. A lot of women would not forgive him what had happened with Daryl Hannah. Then he went back to the rock stuff. And he's made some great band albums. But the artists are just people reading the audience too. Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot did some amazing stuff.
Yes.
And I'd met him, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. People knew I was a fan. I went to see him on, I think, the second to last tour. You couldn't sit there. He just couldn't sing. Should have hung it up. The guy could get paid. There are people who no longer have the voice. Therefore, give it up. Having said that, people want to see you. Why not? I mean, I happen to be a fan of this guy, Lee Michaels. Okay? And Lee Michaels, the big hit was, Do You Know What I Mean? He ruined his career. He was known as an organ player and then switched to playing guitar, okay? But there's some incredible stuff on the early albums. He then opened a couple of restaurants, which are pretty good. And I talked to some friends. What about him going on the road? Well, first there had to be a guarantee from the clubs. They weren't sure they'd get a guarantee. And Lee does not want to look backward, does not want to trade on the old stuff.
Okay.
So these artists are just people struggling. The other thing is, there are these bands that play the Sheds every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking to Irving, and I say, why is that act out on the road every summer? And he goes, the manager needs the money.
Of course.
It's like people have no idea what is going on with the money and the bills, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times things just, you think, as I say, it's like the ticketing thing. You think these people are idols. There are some people like that, but very few.
I noticed last year, 2024, I was looking at Google Trends, and I put in Spotify just to bring it back around. And I noticed that over the past 5 years, search traffic for Spotify has gone on a straight up. And then I went and looked at their stock price, and I noticed that from last January 2023 or 2024 to this January, it went up from $181 a share to $450 up to $500 at one point in December. What is the future of companies like Spotify?
What people have to understand about Spotify is the business doesn't scale. Let's use the example of a record album, the old days. Cost you $100,000 to make the record. You're pressing the record. So if you sell like 100,000 copies, you have to amortize those costs. You sell 10 million, the effective cost of each one is almost nothing. Okay.
Right.
All of these internet businesses scale. Okay. Yeah, they keep adding users and it costs almost nothing. Spotify has to pay essentially 70 up to 70 cents, between 60 and 70 cents to rights holders, no matter what. So it's not really a good business because it doesn't scale. You get bigger, you have these incredible costs. The other thing is, I just got to stop here for a second. People say, Spotify's got to pay more. There's only 100 cents in the dollar. Where's it going to come from? I was talking to Lucienne Grange one of the times early, they're talking 10 years ago, when Taylor Swift came out with some negative Spotify thing. He goes, he didn't like it. He goes, that's our partner. We have to keep them in business. That's how we get paid. Spotify is their number one thing. So Spotify, yes, it's bad business to begin with. Apple's got their own. Amazon's got their own. Who needs to buy Spotify, which is not cheap? Nobody. Okay. Right. So that is not the play. You never say never. The numbers aren't good. So they say, we're going to go into podcasting. They spent a ton of money and the return wasn't equivalent. What they did was said, that was a wrong turn. We're cutting down, et cetera, et cetera. That's why the stock went up, because they did that. They laid off people. It's the same thing with Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg said he was going to change completely how Facebook worked. People were insane. The stock went totally the wrong direction. Then he woke up one day and said, well, we're going to do the other thing. And the stock went back up. So, yes, if you talk to Daniel Ek, who was people say, why should this guy be a billionaire? Okay. This guy and the partner, Martin Lorenzen, who is a nice guy, different personality, but this guy flew night at Coach. You can't get in to see these people. He would hang out in the office for hours. He was dedicated. He made it happen, not single-handedly, etc. Are you willing to risk that much? This is how it works in every business.
Yes, that's right.
It's just like in professional sports, which have now changed. People say, they make too much money, the athletes. Well, if they didn't pay the athletes, the billionaire owner would just get more money.
That's right.
This guy is the face of what's going on. So
right.
Spotify, you got to give them credit. It's what Amazon did. They've been investing in their future because it's a worldwide business. They're in a million number of territories. But pressure from Wall Street made them cut costs, and they could have been profitable earlier. Forgetting the value of the stock, whatever, it's a business. It doesn't scale, it's hobbled. So therefore, they're trying. Now they have the audio books, and they're trying to change don't want to get too into the law, but how they split up, payments, et cetera, et cetera. It's bad business. People who anti-Spotify, you think that they're just rolling in dough. No, most of it passes through them.
Bob, this has been really enlightening. I was telling some of my friends I was having you on, and they were psyched. And I'm sorry I didn't ask you sooner. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but I will. Rick, you're an icon. Well, let me ask you. Okay, you've been doing this for years. Within the last 12 months, there's been a huge step up to household name musicians. Okay? First, a lot of your things were just you talking about how the songs are played, et cetera, et cetera. To what degree was that a conscious decision, and how did you execute?
You mean like people like David Gilmour, things like that, bigger name people?
Rick Wakeman, I know there's an M Sting. Yeah. It goes on and on.
It's kind of different for each one, but a lot of the people reach out to me, or their publicists do, because frankly, when they come on my channel, I get 10 times the views that going on Jimmy Fallon or one of these other shows do. Plus, they can talk as long as they want on whatever topic they want. And I don't have an agenda for any of the interviews. I have people on because I want to hear their opinion on things.
Okay. So I just want to get into the mechanics.
Yeah.
So basically, just doing what you're doing and having certain household names. You didn't do anything special.
No,
it's
nothing.
Just the environment that a higher level of person was reaching out to you.
Yeah, yeah. And I made more time for interviews in the past year. And it's really fun to do. It's fun to talk to people, especially all these people that I'm huge fans of. I would say I have the opposite opinion. Almost everyone that I've interviewed has been incredibly nice and gracious. Not everyone, but I'd say 99%. Of course, when people ask me that, it's like, well, what are they going to do? Come here and be a jerk? It's
yeah, exactly.
So it's not fair to but in my experience, all the people that I've interviewed have been incredibly gracious and
okay.
And
You've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
You know what works. If you ever sit at home and go, haven't analyzed Spotify top 10 recently. I know that works. Should I do it?
I only do Spotify top 10 once every 4 months because that's how long it takes for it to recycle, where there's no songs on from the last time. I do it because I'm interested in that. I make videos that I'm interested in. I put out a video today about an Alan Holdsworth track, great progressive rock guitar player, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Alan has 39,000 followers on Spotify. I know an Alan Holdsworth video is not going to get views, but I don't care. I make videos on things I'm interested in.
You'd be stunned who's huge. I mean, Eddie Van Halen, all these people, huge Alan Holdsworth fan. Let me just put it a slightly different way.
Yep.
Do you sit here ever and you go, well, I know what works. I'm going to go in that vein. You make a lot of videos, so it's not like you're one and only shot. Because I'm sure you track the numbers. We all do. And you say, hey, I know from a mutual friend that your goal is to get 10 million followers, okay? So
well, that's what I told my daughter when she asked me how long I'm going to do YouTube for. So I said, will you go until you get 10 million? Because that's the next award, Bob, is the Diamond Award.
No problem. All great. But I'm sure you think at times, well, how the fuck am I going to do that? What video is going to work?
I never know what videos are going to do well or not. I'm always surprised when things do well. My video where I complained that David Gilmour will never be on my YouTube channel has more views than me interviewing David Gilmour. Now, the David Gilmour video, it's 500,000 behind me complaining that he'll never come on my channel. Okay, so people
wait. But I know that, listen, I've been doing this a long time. You want to write us versus them, little versus big. People love that shit. Just like there are people preying on the wannabe musicians, Reverb Nation, and all this other stuff. You want to say people, hey, I can give you a chance. There's unlimited money. But, okay, let's go one step further. You reach 10 million, then what?
I'll do it till it's not fun anymore. That's pretty much it.
You go to a gig now. People recognize you?
Oh, I go to the grocery store. People recognize me. Between YouTube and Instagram, I've had about 2 billion views. People recognize me in walking down the street in London or Stockholm or Italy, Florence, wherever. And no one ever says, "Are you Rick Beato?" They're like, "Oh my God, it's Rick Beato." The people that watch me have seen me so many times, and someone has stumbled on one of my videos or two of my videos. And I've made so many videos on so many different topics of all different genres of music, from rock to metal to classical music to jazz, all different eras, contemporary music, whatever. People have seen me. If I go to see, when I went to see David Gilmour at Madison Square Garden, everybody knows me there. They see me.
Is this the dream, or is there a dream beyond this?
I don't know. I don't know if this is the dream. I had some friends that had to be evacuated during the fires in LA in the past week. And one of my friends said, if you had to evacuate in 15 minutes or even 2 hours, what would you take? I've got this gear here and everything. So I'd take my wife, my kids, our pets, and that's it. I wouldn't take any gear. Nothing. There's no guitar I would pick up. Nothing's worth that much. None of it means anything. It's just a means to make music, and you could just always buy another guitar or whatever, And I always say that eventually everything here, Bob, is going to end up in a landfill at some point.
Oh, I tell my girlfriend, because I know the vinyl records are worth a fortune. You can throw everything else out, but sell the vinyl records.
I don't know. But that being said, I still own every vinyl record I've ever owned in my life.
As
and I
do
have every
I.
CD I ever bought too. So,
well, I have that stuff too, plus a lot of shit I got for free.
I'm a big fan of yours. I've been following you forever. I've been following you forever. And I was like, why haven't I had Bob on? I've been on your podcast before, and I was like, I'm going to reach out to Bob and ask him. And I'm so glad that you said yes, because you have such great takes on things, not just the music business, everything you write. And I will say that, when you hit something out of the park, it's the word of mouth. Everybody shares it with me. And it's like, I already read his column, his newsletter. So I think it's a great thing. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Bob. You're a good man.
Well, you're an icon. I believe I said it's been great talking to you. Generally speaking, I have a hard time talking. I find that most people are not interested. But when someone is interested, I could talk all day. Having said that, I'll stop talking now. Rick, thanks so much.
Thanks, Bob.